My name is Kris Ferranti. I'm a partner in Shearman and Sterling's real estate group in New York.
My name is Jonathan Newman. I'm a senior associate in Shearman & Sterling's real estate group, also in New York.
John and I recently co-authored an article titled Corporate Headquarters Leasing, Key Considerations for a Post-Pandemic Workplace. The COVID-19 pandemic has clearly had a big impact on the way the corporate world views office space. In light of this rapidly changing landscape, our article examines the key legal and business considerations companies must keep in mind when leasing their corporate headquarters. The article includes things like what to consider in selecting space, tips and details around the process of interviewing leasing lawyers, leasing brokers, designers, engineers, architects, construction professionals, and project managers, and how best to assemble internal and external teams. Now, this short video is only a sample of key points from our article, but we highly recommend that you read the entirety of the article for full context. First off, what is a headquarters lease? A headquarters lease is intended to include leases of office space of significant size or importance to the tenant, in that the space will house senior executives and administrative staff of the business units involved and be regarded as the corporate hub for the tenant. Headquarters leases tend to be leases for relatively long terms, require substantial investment in leasehold improvements, and involve personnel who require a high level of service. And importantly, the headquarters office may represent a projection of the image of the business units. The toughest part is generally figuring out where to begin. And while there are many articles written on substantive lease issues, this article focuses on the issues relevant at the commencement of the leasing process. We urge the reader to keep in mind two important initial goals: to build an internal and external team, and to define essential transaction criteria. The size of an internal team depends on the size of the company and lease space requirements. Over the course of the last 2 years, the IT and audiovisual, security and office or operations departments has taken on an increasingly significant role in the workplace, given the recent emphasis on technology, cybersecurity protections, and the rise of remote work. So drafting them into the initial stages of the process is critical. Locating outside experts such as real estate brokers, real estate lawyers, and architects and space designers is also key. Most people will intuitively not think to start with a real estate lawyer, but we argue in the article that doing so can prove immensely helpful in ensuring a successful process. We advise the reader to begin with an interview of potential leasing lawyer candidates to not only determine which candidate feels most qualified, but also to test relevant questions and issues to help refine and focus them. And the article includes example questions that can be asked during the interview process. John's now going to touch on some key points from the article about engaging a leasing broker.
Thanks, Kris. As Kris alluded to, the leasing broker is a key external advisor that needs to be engaged early in the process when considering a headquarters lease. There are three primary tasks that a leasing broker will engage in. The first, of course, is the identification and presentation of potential office space. The second is the negotiation of basic business terms in the form of a term sheet. And then the third is obviously coordinating the lease negotiation itself. Here, of course, the quality that is most important with respect to engaging a broker is their relevant experience in the marketplace in that particular submarket. They're the ones, an experienced broker will be the ones that know the relevant landscape, that know the landlords, that know the players in the relevant submarket or submarkets, and are able to ably present the options and negotiate the deal. Now, of course, once a leasing broker is chosen, it's very important to have a written agreement memorializing this engagement. Regarding the fee arrangement, from a tenant's perspective, the leasing commissions and reimbursements will typically be paid by a landlord. And so it's important for the brokerage agreement to actually spell that out and to ensure that the tenant has proper protections there. Another important element of a brokerage agreement is a key persons provision, some sort of a provision requiring that certain key people from the broker's shop are actually working on this engagement and are devoting time and energy to finding this leasing space for the prospective tenant and servicing and actually engaging in this engagement. Again, as Kris mentioned earlier, this is why it's so important to have counsel lined up early in the process, because it will be important for the tenant to have counsel look at that brokerage agreement. Brokers certainly have an internal team that negotiate these agreements all the time, and so to engage a lawyer to actually represent the tenant to do the same on their side is critical. And so this is yet another area where engaging a lawyer, perhaps even before engaging a broker, is important. Kris now is going to touch on some of the other external professionals that should be engaged in connection with this process.
Thanks, John. So additional professionals for the external team can include a designer, engineer, an architect, a project manager or cost advisor, and construction professionals. As noted earlier, it can be helpful, if not essential, to have these other professionals included as part of the initial team evaluating space requirements. It will also be important, similar to what John was mentioning on the leasing broker, to take care in reviewing and negotiating each of the engagement letters with these various professionals. Aside from the obvious economic points, it's critical to tailor the scope of the engagement to ensure the desired services are provided and at the right time, and to ensure legal protection in the event of losses incurred as a result of the commissions or omissions of these third-party professionals. Again, another reason it's helpful to engage the leasing lawyer early on in the process. Of course, one of the benefits of engaging all of these other professionals early in the process is the synergies that are gained from having everyone work together on the project at an early stage. Each professional comes with their own sort of unique knowledge of the market, and combining this collective experience together can help ensure a smooth and successful process. John, do you want to now speak to the premises criteria?
Thanks. So this is perhaps one of the most important parts of the headquarters leasing process, and that is assessing exactly what your criteria is for choosing the premises. And there are a number of considerations that go into this, of course, and for each company and each tenant, the priorities that are placed on one premise, on the criteria, the premises criteria, will depend for each company as applicable. Of course, here we list some of the main considerations for any tenant, and the first, of course, is location. Where should the headquarters lease premises be? And in choosing location, of course, one of the main considerations to think about is transport and traffic for employees, the location of the labor pool, proximity to customers and suppliers, area cost, industry concentrations, prestige and reputation of the location. That's something that, of course, we see play out, in particular in big metropolitan areas such as Manhattan or Chicago. And here, it's also important to keep in mind current trends. So in New York City, the trend is now towards live, work, play environments. And so it's not just the prestige. So here you have sort of the prestige and reputation of the location being dependent on the trends in the particular submarket. The size of the space, of course, is a huge criteria to think through. And again, size and layout is something that does change over time. And now we see the trends being towards smaller size premises, open layouts, smaller offices. And so that's another thing to keep in mind when thinking through a lease location. Timing is important. When can the landlord, the potential landlord, provide the space? How much runway does the tenant have to actually move out of its old premises and move into the new? Of course, one of the biggest ones, perhaps the biggest one for most tenants, is going to be the financial considerations. What does the rent look like? Not just fixed rent, but additional rent, or the additional charges for not just for taxes and operating expenses, but also for freight elevator and overtime HVAC. What do all these costs look like? And what will they look like over time? And then another criteria to think through, which Kris alluded to earlier, is the physical criteria of the premises. What sort of IT and audiovisual requirements does the tenant have, and can the potential space and building meet those needs? What are the HVAC needs of this tenant? What are the health and safety needs of this tenant? Of course, this has come into play much more given the COVID pandemic. Particular companies have very specific COVID-related protocols, and so what sort of health and safety protocols does the potential premises have, and do those protocols align with the needs of the tenant? Security thing Kris alluded to, security. What are the security requirements of the tenant, and what security protections does the potential building provide? We see, particularly with banks and financial institutions, and law firms for that matter, there are very particular security requirements that those tenants have, and assessing whether a building and a landlord can actually meet those criteria is very important for those types of tenants. And then the last consideration would be delivery and access. Is this tenant the type of company where they need access to a loading dock and a freight elevator all the time? Is this a company that receives significant deliveries and sends out significant deliveries, or not? There too, the consideration will be, what kind of freight access does this premises have? How close is it to the highways and byways of the particular submarket? And those sorts of considerations. I'll turn it back over now to Kris to discuss briefly the RFP request for proposal process.
Great. Thanks, John. So although there are several means of conducting a space search, the common format is what we call the request for proposal, or RFP. This is where the hard work and team building recommended in the article come together. The RFP allows a prospective tenant to invite selected landlords to address the full range of requirements, costs, and issues that were generated by the space and business unit criteria. Although the market differs from area to area, the RFP approach is directed to resolving many, if not most, of the core issues at the preliminary stage of negotiations and before a draft lease is even produced. Perhaps just as important, the RFP process allows, or rather requires, this information to be presented in a manner which collates input from all the various team members. The importance of the RFP and letter of intent from a tenant's perspective underlines how critical it is for the tenant to involve its third-party professionals, particularly its outside counsel, during this stage of the process. Now, before we close out, we would be remiss not to give credit to a former colleague and friend. Our article is based on an older article written by Lee Kuntz, a former partner in the Shearman and Sterling Real Estate Group, who passed away in 2019. Lee was integral to the growth of the Shearman and Sterling Real Estate Group and to the many successes it has had over the years. His technical excellence and commitment to client service remain the pillars upon which the group operates today. Lee had a long and distinguished career at Shearman, where he practiced for 41 years, including 34 years as a partner. And during his tenure, he held several leadership positions at the firm, including as managing partner. With that, we hope you take the time to read the full article. After doing so, we think you'll take comfort in the fact that you'll be better prepared to appreciate and consider the various points and issues and to weigh the various compromises that will be required. And along the way, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me or John. Thank you.
Thank you.